Some mistakes can't be undone with money. Some wounds can't be healed with power. And sometimes the universe has a way of bringing our past back to us when we least expect it. Not as punishment, but as a chance for redemption. This is the story of Nathaniel Blackwood, a man who had everything money could buy, until a single word from a child's lips shattered his perfect world and forced him to confront the one thing his wealth couldn't fix, the past he ran from. The New York winter bit hard that evening, the kind of cold that seeps through expensive wool and finds the skin beneath. Snowflakes danced under the amber glow of street lamps as Nathaniel Blackwood stepped out of the Grand Plaza Hotel, the satisfied murmur of wealthy donors still echoing in his ears. The charity auction had been a success, another $1 million raised for children's education, another plaque to hang on his office wall, another headline praising the generosity of Blackwood Enterprises' enigmatic CEO. Nathaniel adjusted his bow tie and checked his Patek Philippe watch. 9:37. His driver was running late, unusual for Thompson, who prided himself on punctuality. "Mr. Blackwood, your car will be here in 3 minutes," his assistant chirped, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Traffic on Fifth Avenue." "Fine," Nathaniel replied, not bothering to look up from his phone as he scrolled through tomorrow's meeting schedule. That's when he heard it. A soft, racking cough that didn't belong among the polished sounds of Manhattan's elite. His eyes lifted, scanning the periphery of the hotel's entrance where the glow of wealth faded into shadow. There, huddled against the cold brick wall, sat a woman. Her clothes were threadbare, her fingers red and raw as they clutched a thin blanket around her shoulders. Beside her, a small boy, perhaps 6 or 7, pressed against her side, seeking warmth that wasn't there to give. Something about the scene pierced through Nathaniel's carefully constructed armor. Before he could rationalize his actions, he was moving toward them, shrugging off his cashmere coat worth more than some people's monthly salary. "Here," he said, draping it over the woman's trembling shoulders. "You need this more than I do." The woman's face remained downcast, hidden beneath a curtain of tangled hair. But the boy looked up, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Thank you, mister," the boy whispered, his voice small against the city's roar. Nathaniel felt something stir within him, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. He crouched down, meeting the child at eye level. "Are you hungry? I can get you both some food, a place to stay tonight. It's too cold to be out here." The woman finally raised her head, ready to decline his offer, and Nathaniel's world stopped spinning. Those eyes, he would recognize them anywhere. The same eyes that had once looked at him with love, with hope, with dreams of a shared future. "Julia?" The name escaped his lips like a prayer. The woman stiffened, recognition and panic flashing across her face. She pulled the boy closer, protective. And then the boy, innocent and unaware of the history crackling in the air between the adults, tilted his head curiously. His eyes, so achingly familiar, studied Nathaniel's face with growing wonder. "Daddy," he whispered. The word hung in the freezing air between them, heavier than any business deal, any corporate merger, any billion-dollar decision Nathaniel had ever faced. In that moment, Nathaniel Blackwood, the man Forbes called Manhattan's most untouchable bachelor, felt his perfectly constructed world begin to crumble. Life can change in a heartbeat, a chance encounter, a single word, a moment of recognition. When was the last time your world shifted on its axis in just an instant? Those moments often become the turning points that define our journey. The streetlight above flickered, casting Julia's face in harsh clarity. 7 years had carved deep lines around her eyes, hollowed her once rosy cheeks, and dulled the auburn hair Nathaniel used to run his fingers through on lazy Sunday mornings. But those eyes, God, those eyes remained unchanged, 2 emerald pools that had once held his entire universe. "Julia," he repeated, softer this time, as if saying her name might break the spell and make her disappear. "What happened to you? Why are you—" "Go away, Nathaniel." Her voice was rough, weathered by years he knew nothing about. She pulled the boy closer, shielding him from Nathaniel's gaze. "Please, just go." Nathaniel felt rooted to the spot, 1,000 questions fighting to escape. But the boy, "Did he just call me?" "It was a mistake." Julia cut him off sharply, her eyes flashing with a protective fury. "He doesn't know what he's saying. He's just cold and confused." But even as she spoke, Nathaniel could see the truth written in the child's features. The shape of his eyes, the stubborn set of his jaw, the same cowlick in his hair that Nathaniel himself had battled every morning in the mirror since childhood. "He's mine, isn't he?" The words came out barely audible, yet they seemed to echo in the space between them. Julia's silence was answer enough. Nathaniel reached out a trembling hand toward the boy, but Julia jerked back, pulling herself and the child further into the shadows. "His name is Elijah," she said finally, something breaking in her voice. "And he stopped being yours the night you chose your family's expectations over us." The words landed like physical blows. Memories flooded back. His father's stern ultimatum, the arranged marriage to the daughter of his father's business partner, the corporate merger that would solidify the Blackwood empire for generations to come. And Julia? Beautiful Julia with her dreams of opening a cooking school, who had no connections, no pedigree, nothing to offer the Blackwood legacy except her love. The love he had walked away from. "Julia, please. Let me help you. Both of you. Whatever happened." "What happened?" Julia let out a bitter laugh that contained no humor. "Life happened, Nathaniel. Life without your money or your promises or your protection. And we survived it. We don't need your guilt now." His assistant's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Blackwood, your car is here." Julia used the interruption to stand, gathering Elijah and the few belongings stuffed into a worn backpack. "Julia, wait." Nathaniel reached for her arm, desperate. "Now, at least let me give you somewhere to stay tonight. It's freezing." For a moment, hesitation clouded her features. Not for herself, he realized, but for the boy shivering against her side. "One night," she finally conceded, her voice barely audible. "Just until morning. Then you never find us again." As Nathaniel guided them toward his waiting car, careful not to touch either of them, he caught Elijah looking up at him with curious eyes that reflected his own. "Are you really my daddy?" the boy whispered. Nathaniel felt his throat close up, unable to form the words that might answer a question he himself was still grappling with. Behind them, the charity event continued, champagne flowing for children they would never meet. Ahead of them, the sleek black car waited to carry them into a night that had suddenly become the most important of Nathaniel's life. Sometimes the most profound discoveries force us to question everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Nathaniel's realization echoes in all our lives. What hidden truths have reshaped your understanding of who you are and what matters most? The ride to Nathaniel's penthouse was thick with silence. Julia sat rigidly, her body angled toward Elijah, a human shield between the boy and his biological father. Elijah's eyes darted around the leather interior of the Bentley, widening at the mini fridge, the television screen, the soft lights embedded in the ceiling. "Your car has a TV?" he asked, wondering momentarily about overcoming his shyness. Nathaniel nodded, his throat still too tight for words. He wanted to tell this child that he could have 100 TVs, the newest gaming console, a room filled with toys, anything he wanted. But he sensed that such promises would only drive Julia further away. When they arrived at his building, the doorman's carefully neutral expression couldn't hide his surprise at Nathaniel's disheveled companions. Julia kept her head high, though her cheeks burned with humiliation. The penthouse spread before them, all gleaming surfaces and spectacular views. 50 stories above the city, the lights of Manhattan created a glittering tapestry below. "Whoa," Elijah breathed, pressing his face against the floor-to-ceiling windows. "We're in the sky." "Elijah, don't touch the glass," Julia said automatically, then caught herself embarrassed at giving household instructions in a home that wasn't hers. "It's okay," Nathaniel said quietly. "He can touch anything he wants." He showed them to the guest suite, a room larger than any apartment Julia had managed to afford in the past 7 years. There are clothes in the closet, he said. Probably not the right size, but clean. The bathroom has everything you might need, and I'll order some food. Julia stood in the middle of the plush carpet, still clutching her backpack like a lifeline. Thank you, she said stiffly. For tonight, but Nathaniel, this doesn't change anything. I know, he said, though inside, everything had already changed. We don't have to talk now, just get some rest, get warm. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. As he turned to leave, Elijah's voice stopped him. Mister? Thank you for helping my mom. She works really hard, but sometimes it's not enough. Nathaniel felt something crack inside his chest. You're welcome, Elijah, and you can call me. He hesitated, glancing at Julia, who shook her head almost imperceptibly. You can call me Nathaniel. He closed the door behind him and made it halfway down the hall before his legs gave out. Sinking to the floor, back against the wall, Nathaniel Blackwood, who had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, buried his face in his hands and wept for the first time since his mother's funeral 20 years ago, in the guest room. Julia stood under the hot shower until her skin turned pink, watching 7 years of struggle temporarily wash down the drain. When she emerged, Elijah was already asleep on the king-sized bed, his small body dwarfed by the luxurious surroundings. She sat beside him, gently stroking his hair. What am I doing? She whispered to the sleeping child. How can I protect you from loving someone who might walk away again? Outside the door, a tray of food appeared. Julia ate ravenously, flavors exploding on her tongue after years of bland subsistence. For just one night, she allowed herself to remember what it felt, like to be safe, to be warm, to be taken care of, for just one night. The comforts many take for granted, a warm shower, a soft bed, a full meal, are luxuries for others. This contrast between privilege and struggle reminds us how thin the line can be between security and uncertainty. What small comforts do you find yourself most grateful for today? Dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that streamed through the penthouse windows. Nathaniel hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his home office, making calls, pulling strings, searching for answers. Julia emerged from the guest room shortly after 6, her posture defensive, ready for battle. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, cleaned as best she could in the bathroom sink. Elijah's still sleeping, she said. Thank you for the room and the food. We'll be going now. Nathaniel looked up from his laptop, shadows under his eyes, testifying to his sleepless night. Going where, Julia? She lifted her chin. That's not your concern. It became my concern the moment I found out I have a son. His voice was quiet but firm. You lost the right to call him that 7 years ago, Julia snapped, then immediately composed herself. Look, I appreciate what you did last night, but it doesn't change anything. We've managed this long without you. Have you? Nathaniel stood, gesturing to the window. Living on the streets, that's managing? Anger flashed in Julia's eyes. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what I've been through. Then tell me, he pleaded. Help me understand. Julia hesitated, decades of pride warring with exhaustion. Finally, she sank into a chair opposite him. We weren't always homeless, she began, her voice barely audible. After that night, I discovered I was pregnant. I tried to contact you, but your number was changed. Your assistant said you were away on extended business. I got the message. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. His father's doing, no doubt, making sure no loose ends remained after ensuring his son made the right choice for the family legacy. I had some savings, Julia continued, enough to get by while I had the baby. I found work as a line cook, then eventually as a prep chef. We had a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was home. Elijah started preschool. Things were stable. What happened? Nathaniel asked, dreading the answer. Cancer happened. Julia's voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands trembled slightly. Breast cancer. Stage 2. I couldn't work during treatment. Medical bills piled up. No insurance, we lost the apartment. After recovery, no restaurant would hire me. Too risky, they said. By then, we were in shelters, then sometimes, not even that. Each word was a knife in Nathaniel's heart. While he had been building his empire, attending galas, dating socialites who meant nothing to him, the woman he had once loved had been fighting for her life, for their son's life. "Why didn't you try to find me again?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Julia laughed, bitterly. "And say what? Remember me, the girl you dumped for your arranged marriage? I'm dying of cancer, and oh, by the way, I had your baby. Would that have worked out well for your perfect life, Nathaniel? For your wife?" "I never married her," Nathaniel said quietly. Julia blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "I called it off 2 weeks before the wedding. Walked away from my father's company, his connections, everything. Started from scratch." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I looked for you, Julia. For months. But you'd disappeared. Completely." Silent stretched between them, 7 years of misunderstandings and assumptions lying exposed in the morning light. "It doesn't matter now," Julia finally said, though her voice had lost some of its edge. "We've lived separate lives. Elijah doesn't know you. And I can't let him get attached to someone who might not stay." Before Nathaniel could respond, the guest room door opened, and Elijah emerged, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He stopped when he saw the adults, sensing the tension in the air. "Mom, are we leaving?" he asked in a small voice. Julia crossed to him, kneeling to straighten his rumpled shirt. "Yes, sweetie, we need to go. Say thank you to Mr. Blackwood for letting us stay." Elijah looked at Nathaniel, his eyes, so like Nathaniel's own, filled with a child's direct curiosity. "Thank you. Your house is the nicest place we've ever stayed." "You're welcome here any time," Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. He cleared his throat. "Actually, before you go, I have a proposition." Julia stiffened, immediately suspicious. "Not like that," Nathaniel assured her. "I own a building on the Lower East Side. There's a vacant apartment, 2 bedrooms. Nothing fancy. It's yours if you want it." "We don't need your charity," Julia began. "It's not charity," Nathaniel interrupted. "It's the bare minimum of what I owe you, both of you." He turned to address Elijah directly. "And it's what any father should provide for his son." Elijah's eyes widened, looking between the adults in confusion. "You're my dad? For real?" Julia closed her eyes briefly. The moment she'd both dreaded and secretly anticipated finally arrived. "Yes," Nathaniel said simply. "I am." The stories we tell ourselves rarely include all the facts. Like Nathaniel discovering Julia's letter, how might your own narrative change if you learned what was happening behind the scenes in your most pivotal moments? With Julia reluctantly accepting the apartment, just until we get back on our feet, Nathaniel found himself in an unfamiliar position. A father searching for a way into his son's life. A man seeking redemption for a mistake he couldn't undo. The first week, he respected Julia's boundaries, providing the apartment and basic necessities but keeping his distance. The second week, he began his investigation in earnest. "I need to know everything," he told Walter Jenkins, his family's former head of security who had retired years ago, but maintained a network of contacts throughout the city. Walter, a stoic man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing, nodded once. "What exactly are we looking for, sir?" Julia Winters. "Everything that happened after she disappeared 7 years ago. Medical records, employment history, addresses. I need to understand what she went through." Walter raised an eyebrow but asked no questions. He'd known Nathaniel since childhood, had watched him rebel against his father's control, and had quietly supported him when he broke away to build his own company. If Nathaniel was investigating a woman from his past, Walter knew there was good reason. The picture that emerged over the following days was one of quiet dignity in the face of crushing hardship. Julia had indeed been diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer when Elijah was 3. Her medical records showed aggressive treatment, complications from substandard care at overwhelmed public clinics, and eventually remission, though with ongoing medication needs she couldn't always afford. Employment records were spotty. Line cook, dishwasher, night janitor in office buildings. Always working, always scraping by until her illness made even that impossible. Most gutting were the eviction notices, the shelter records, the police reports of a mugging that had left her with broken ribs and without the month's rent money. Through it all, Elijah's school records showed a child who, despite everything, was bright, well-behaved, and remarkably resilient. His teacher's notes often mentioned how protective Julia was, how she never missed a parent-teacher conference. Despite working multiple jobs, how the boy always had a home-packed lunch even when it was clear there was little food to spare. Nathaniel sat in his office late one night, surrounded by the evidence of Julia's struggle, and felt shame wash over him. Not once in 7 years of building his fortune had he gone without a meal, slept in the cold, or worried about basic medical care. His self-made success had still been cushioned by his education, his connections, his family name that opened doors even when he tried to distance himself from it. "I found something else, sir," Walter said, placing a final folder on the desk. From before. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter addressed to Nathaniel Blackwood, dated 1 week after he had ended their relationship. It had been returned unopened, marked recipient unknown. Nathaniel unfolded it with trembling hands, recognizing Julia's handwriting immediately. "Nathaniel, I know you've made your choice, and I respect that you have obligations to your family that I can't understand. I'm writing not to change your mind, but because you deserve to know. I'm pregnant. It's yours, ours, and I've decided to keep the baby. I don't want anything from you. Not money, not support, not even acknowledgement if that's your choice. I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't give you the chance to be part of your child's life. If you want to be, whatever you decide, please know that I'll always tell our child that their father is a good man, who did what he thought was right for everyone involved. There will be no bitterness, no resentment passed down. I loved you. Part of me always will." Nathaniel let the letter fall from his grasp, a strange sound escaping his throat. Part sob, part laughter at the cruel irony. All these years he'd believed Julia had simply disappeared, unwilling to face the awkwardness of his engagement. All these years he'd searched half-heartedly, eventually convincing himself it was better to leave the past behind. And all these years, she had been raising his son alone, believing he had received her letter and chosen to ignore it. "Walter," he said hoarsely, "who intercepted this?" The older man's face remained impassive, but his eyes held a deep sadness. "Your father had your mail screened after you broke the engagement. Any correspondence from Ms. Winters was to be handled. Nathaniel's father had passed away 3 years ago, taking this secret, among many others, to his grave. One more manipulation in a lifetime of controlling his son's destiny. Thank you, Walter," Nathaniel said, gathering the scattered pages. "That will be all." Alone in his office, Nathaniel made a decision. No more investigations from a distance. No more corporate solutions to human problems. This wasn't a business deal to be negotiated or a hostile takeover to be managed. This was his family, and he would fight for them not as Nathaniel Blackwood, CEO, but simply as a man who had been given a second chance he didn't deserve. Truth arrives in its own timing, not always when we want it, but perhaps when we need it most. In your own life, has a delayed revelation ever arrived at precisely the right moment to guide your next steps? The small diner on 9th Avenue had seen better days. The vinyl booths were cracked, the tabletops worn smooth by decades of plates and elbows. But it was neutral territory, a public place where Julia felt safe meeting Nathaniel. He arrived first, dressed not in his usual tailored suit but in simple jeans and a sweater. No watch, no cufflinks, nothing that screamed wealth or power. Just a man waiting anxiously in a booth, turning a paper napkin into confetti. Julia entered precisely on time, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing clothes that were clean but worn. She slid into the booth opposite him, her posture stiff. "Thank you for coming," Nathaniel said. "You said it was important." Her voice was neutral, giving nothing away. He nodded, taking a deep breath. "I found your letter." Julia frowned. "What letter?" "The one you sent me 7 years ago. About the pregnancy." He met her eyes directly. "I never received it, Julia. My father had it intercepted, along with any other attempts you might have made to contact me. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know about Elijah until that night outside the hotel." Julia's expression flickered, surprise, confusion, then a flash of anger quickly suppressed. "Your father always did think I wasn't good enough for the mighty Blackwood name." "He was wrong," Nathaniel said simply. "About so many things." The waitress arrived, pouring coffee into thick white mugs. Julia wrapped her hands around hers, seeking warmth. "Even if that's true," she said after a long pause, "what difference does it make now? We've built separate lives. Elijah has grown up without you." "I'd like to change that," Nathaniel said quietly. "Not to take over or control anything, just to be present. To support both of you however I can." Julia studied him over the rim of her mug. "And what exactly does that look like in your mind? Weekend visits, holiday cards, child support checks that ease your conscience?" The bitterness in her voice cut deep, but Nathaniel recognized it wasn't directed entirely at him. Life had taught Julia harsh lessons about depending on others. "It looks like whatever you're comfortable with," he answered honestly. "I won't push, but I'd like a chance to know my son, and to make up for lost time, if that's even possible." "Why?" Julia challenged. "Why now? Is it guilt? Obligation? Some midlife crisis making you suddenly crave a family connection?" Nathaniel considered her questions carefully, knowing his answer mattered more than perhaps any business proposal he'd ever made. "Partly guilt, yes," he admitted. "I should have looked harder for you. I should have questioned why you disappeared so completely." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But it's more than that. Seeing Elijah, seeing you after all these years, I realized my life has been hollow. Successful on paper, empty in reality." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph, sliding it across the table. It showed the two of them 7 years ago, laughing on a ferry to Staten Island, the wind whipping Julia's hair across her smiling face as Nathaniel looked at her with undisguised adoration. "I've kept this all these years," he said softly. "The only thing I saved when I walked away from my father's world. I told myself it was just a memory of a simpler time, but the truth is, you were the last real thing in my life. After you, everything else was just performance." Julia touched the photograph with trembling fingers, memories flooding back. "You kept this?" "I did." He hesitated, then added, "I'm not asking for us to be together, Julia. I know too much has happened, but I'm asking for a chance to be Elijah's father. Not his provider or his benefactor. His father." Julia was silent for a long moment. Conflict, visible in her expression. Finally, she sighed. "He asks about you, you know. Every few months since he was old enough to understand that most kids have dads. I never knew what to tell him." "What did you say?" Nathaniel asked, gently. "That his father wasn't ready to be a dad when he was born?" Julia met his eyes. "I never said you were a bad person. I promised you that in my letter, and I kept my word." Nathaniel swallowed hard. Even after everything, she had protected him in Elijah's eyes. "I'd like to meet him properly," he said. "Not as a stranger who helped us, but as who I am." Julia considered this, weighing years of protective instinct against her son's needs. "One step at a time," she finally said. "You can come for dinner tomorrow. We'll tell him together. After that, we'll see." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. We often expect second chances to be grand gestures, but they usually begin with small moments of vulnerability. A shared meal, an honest conversation, a simple gift that says, "I see you." What small gesture has opened the door to healing in your own relationships? The apartment Nathaniel had provided was modest by his standards, luxurious by Julia's. Clean, functional, in a safe building with reliable heat and hot water, things Julia had learned never to take for granted. He stood outside the door at precisely 6 o'clock, a small gift bag in his hand, heart pounding as if he were 20 again, picking her up for their first date. When Julia opened the door, the smell of cooking enveloped him. Rich, savory, with hints of herbs and spices. "You're cooking," he said stupidly, suddenly awkward. A ghost of a smile touched Julia's lips. "Some habits never die, even in the worst. Times I tried to make sure Elijah had home-cooked meals when possible." She stepped back. "Come in. He's excited to meet you." Elijah sat at the small kitchen table, coloring intensely in a well-worn book. He looked up when Nathaniel entered, his expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Hi," the boy said cautiously. "Hi, Elijah," Nathaniel replied, equally cautious. "Thank you for letting me come to dinner." Julia moved between them, a buffer and a bridge at once. "Elijah, remember how we talked about your dad this morning? This is him. His name is Nathaniel." Elijah studied Nathaniel with the unflinching directness only children possess. "Mom said you didn't know about me before, is that true?" Nathaniel knelt down to the boy's level, making himself smaller, less intimidating. "Yes, that's true. If I had known about you, I would have been part of your life from the beginning." Elijah considered this, then asked, "Are you going to be part of it now?" "I'd like to be very much," Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "If that's okay with you and your mom." Elijah looked to Julia, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I guess that's okay," the boy decided. "Do you know how to play Uno? Mom and I play every night, but it's more fun with 3 people." "I haven't played in a long time," Nathaniel admitted. "But I'd love to learn again." He held out the gift bag. "I brought you something. It's not much, just—" Elijah took the bag eagerly, pulling out a child-sized chef's apron and a beginner's cookbook for kids. His eyes widened. "Mom, look! It's for cooking, like you used to do." Julia's breath caught, a complex emotion crossing her face. "You remembered," she said to Nathaniel, "that you wanted to open a cooking school? That it was your dream before?" He trailed off, the words "before I ruined everything" hanging unspoken between them. "Elijah loves cooking with me," Julia said softly. "He says he wants to be a chef someday." The boy nodded enthusiastically. "I'm going to have a restaurant with a star, a Michelin star." "Michelin," Julia corrected gently, the practiced response of a mother who had heard this declaration many times before. "Can I help with dinner?" Elijah asked, already putting on his new apron. "The table still needs to be set," Julia suggested, and Elijah scrambled to get plates from the cabinet. Left momentarily alone, Nathaniel and Julia stood in awkward silence. "Thank you," she finally said, "for the gift. It was thoughtful." "I remember everything, Julia," Nathaniel said quietly. "Every dream you shared, every plan we made. I just wanted him to know that I see him, not as an obligation but as a person, with his own dreams." Julia looked away, blinking rapidly. "Dinner will be ready in 5 minutes. It's nothing fancy, just pasta." "It smells amazing," Nathaniel said honestly. Dinner was a strange mixture of tension and normalcy. Elijah carried much of the conversation, jumping between topics with a child's enthusiasm: school, his friend Miguel, a book about dinosaurs he was reading, his favorite TV show about kids who cooked. Nathaniel listened, asking questions, storing away each detail like precious gems. This was his son's life, the life he had missed, the interests and experiences that had shaped him into the bright, curious boy sitting across the table. Julia watched them interact, her guard slowly lowering, as she observed Nathaniel's genuine interest in everything Elijah said. Not once did he check his phone, look at his watch, or show any sign that there was anywhere else he'd rather be. After dinner came Uno, played at the small coffee table in the living room. Elijah proved to be fiercely competitive, crowing with delight when he made Nathaniel draw 4 cards. Julia played more strategically, a slight smile on her lips when she quietly won the first 2 rounds. "You're letting me win," she accused Nathaniel when he made an obviously poor play. "I would never," he protested, but his eyes danced with the same humor she remembered from years ago. By the time Elijah's bedtime rolled around, something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, but a fragile truce built on the foundation of their shared love for this child. "Can you come back tomorrow?" Elijah asked as Julia tucked him in. "I want to show you my school project. It's about space." Nathaniel glanced at Julia, not wanting to overstep. When she nodded slightly, he smiled. "I'd love to see it. If it's okay with your mom, I could pick you up from school." Elijah's face lit up. "Really? None of my friends get picked up in cars like yours." "Maybe we could walk instead," Nathaniel suggested, sensing Julia's discomfort with displays of wealth. "Get some ice cream on the way home." "Even better," Elijah exclaimed, already planning tomorrow's adventure. After the boy was asleep, Nathaniel helped Julia clear the last of the dishes, working in companionable silence. "He's amazing," Nathaniel said as he dried a plate. "You've done an incredible job with him, Julia, despite everything." Julia set down the dish she was washing, gripping the edge of the sink. "It wasn't always like this," she admitted, her voice low. "There were nights I couldn't feed him properly. Times I had to leave him with neighbors because I was too sick from chemo to care for him. Days I worried he'd be taken from me because we had nowhere to live." Her shoulders trembled slightly. "Do you know what kept me going in the worst moments? Not hate or bitterness toward you. It was the fear that if I failed, if I couldn't provide for him, someone would look at his birth certificate, find you, and you'd take him away because you could give him what I couldn't." Nathaniel set down the towel and turned her gently to face him. "I would never have done that." "How would I have known that?" she asked, eyes bright with unshed tears. "The man I loved chose his family's expectations over our relationship. Why wouldn't he choose wealth and privilege over a struggling single mother's love?" The truth of her words struck him with physical force. Of course she had feared that. His past actions had given her every reason to. "I can't change what happened," he said quietly, "or erase what you've been through. But I promise you this. I will never try to replace you or compete with you for Elijah's love. You are his mother, the parent who was there, who sacrificed everything for him. Nothing can change that." Julia studied his face, searching for sincerity. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded once before turning back to the dishes. "Tomorrow at 3, she said. "His school is on East 7th Street, don't be late. He hates being the last one picked up." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was trust, the first fragile seed of it, planted in soil that had long been barren. Rebuilding what was broken happened slowly. One genuine moment, one kept promise at a time. The space between Julia and Nathaniel gradually fills with new trust. What small, consistent actions have helped heal the important relationships in your life? Spring arrived in New York, melting away the last remnants of the bitter winter that had brought them together. In the 3 months since that fateful night, a careful routine had developed. Nathaniel picked Elijah up from school 3 days a week, helped with homework, and stayed for dinner. Weekends often involved a trip to the park, a museum, or sometimes just grocery shopping together. Normal family activities that Nathaniel had never imagined would bring him such joy. Julia had found work at a small neighborhood bistro, starting as prep cook but quickly promoted to line chef when her talent became apparent. The owner, a gruff woman named Sophia, who had once worked in Michelin-starred restaurants before opening her own place, had taken Julia under her wing. "She's talking about letting me create a special for the menu," Julia told Nathaniel one evening, as they sat on a park bench, watching Elijah scramble over a jungle gym. "Something seasonal for spring." "That's wonderful," Nathaniel said, genuinely pleased. He hesitated, then asked, "Have you ever thought about teaching cooking classes again? Your original dream?" Julia shrugged, but a spark of the old passion lit her eyes. Sometimes. But starting something like that takes capital, connections. Things I don't have. Things I do have, Nathaniel said carefully. They'd established boundaries early on. He provided for Elijah's needs but respected Julia's independence, never pushing financial help on her directly. Nathaniel, she began, a warning in her voice. Not as a handout, he clarified quickly. As a business investment in you, in your talent. He turned to face her fully. I've tasted your cooking, Julia. You have a gift. And I've seen how you are with Elijah in the kitchen. Patient, encouraging. You'd be an amazing teacher. Julia was quiet for a long moment, watching Elijah play. I can't be in business with you, she finally said. It complicates things too. Much. Not with me, Nathaniel corrected. I know people looking for investment opportunities in the culinary world. I could make introductions, nothing more. And they wouldn't know about our connection? Julia asked skeptically. Not unless you wanted them to. It would be about your talent, not our past. Julia considered this, temptation warring with pride. I'll think about it, she finally said. Not a yes, but not the immediate rejection he would have received months ago. Progress came in such small moments. Like the first time Julia called him when Elijah had a high fever, asking Nathaniel to bring over children's Tylenol because the corner store was closed, and she didn't want to take Elijah out in the rain. Or the night Elijah had a nightmare and, half asleep, called for Daddy instead of Nathaniel, leaving both adults frozen in shock until Julia quietly stepped aside, allowing Nathaniel to comfort his son. There were setbacks too. The afternoon. Nathaniel arrived with a new bicycle for Elijah without consulting Julia first, leading to their first real argument since reconnecting. Or the school event where another parent mistook them for a married couple, causing Julia to withdraw into cool politeness for days afterward. Through it all, Elijah flourished. His teachers reported improved confidence. His nightmares decreased, and he spoke excitedly about when I grow up in a way that suggested he now believed in a future worth planning for. One warm Saturday in May, Nathaniel took Elijah to Central Park. They had a routine now, feeding the ducks, playing catch, getting hot dogs from the same vendor who knew them by name. Dad? Elijah asked as they sat on a bench, the word still new enough to send a thrill through Nathaniel every time he heard it. Are you and Mom ever going to get married? Nathaniel nearly choked on his water. What makes you ask that? Elijah shrugged, kicking his feet against the bench. Miguel's parents got divorced, but then they got married again. He says it's because they remembered they loved each other. Do you love Mom? The innocent directness of the question left Nathaniel speechless for a moment. Did he love Julia? The young woman he'd abandoned 7 years ago, certainly. But this Julia, stronger, more guarded, shaped by hardship he couldn't begin to understand? It's complicated, buddy, he said finally. Your mom and I care about each other because we both love you so much. But adults don't always get married just because they care about each other. Elijah considered this, his face scrunched in concentration. But you look at her the same way Miguel's dad looks at his mom, like she's special. Nathaniel felt heat rise in his cheeks. Had he been so transparent? Your mom is special, he said, carefully. She's the strongest, bravest person I know, but that doesn't mean we'll get married. Okay, Elijah said, already distracted by a nearby dog. Can we get ice cream? Later that evening, after returning Elijah home, Nathaniel found himself lingering in the kitchen while Julia prepared a simple dinner. Their movements had become synchronized over months of shared meals. He knew which cabinet held the plates, she knew he liked extra pepper on his pasta, a domestic choreography neither had consciously learned. Elijah asked if we were going to get married today, Nathaniel said abruptly, immediately regretting his lack of tact when Julia's hand stilled on the spoon she was using to stir the sauce. What did you tell him? She asked, not turning around. That it's complicated. That adults don't always get married just because they care about each other. He hesitated, then added, that you're the strongest person I know. Julia was quiet, for so long that Nathaniel wondered if she'd heard him. Finally, she set down the spoon and turned to face him. "Do you know what Elijah asked me last week?" she said. "He asked if you were going to disappear again. If you'd get tired of us and go back to your real life." Nathaniel felt the words like a physical blow. "What did you tell him?" "That I don't think you will. That people make mistakes, but they can change." She met his eyes directly. "That I believe you when you say you want to be his father." The implied trust in her words, hard-won, cautiously, given, meant more than any declaration of forgiveness could have. "Thank you," Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "Don't thank me," Julia said quietly. "Just don't prove me wrong." Trust returns in whispers, not shouts. It grows in the quiet spaces between words, in the reliability of showing up, in actions that match promises made. Have you noticed how the most profound trust often builds in these nearly invisible moments of consistency? Summer descended on New York, bringing sticky heat that made the city simmer with both energy and irritation. By unspoken agreement, Nathaniel and Julia had settled into a comfortable co-parenting arrangement, their interactions warm, but carefully, bounded. Until the day of Elijah's school graduation, PS 116's auditorium buzzed with excited children and proud parents, all gathered to celebrate the kindergartner's promotion to first grade. Julia saved seats in the third row, her expression a mixture of pride and nostalgia as she watched Elijah chat animatedly with his classmates backstage. "Sorry I'm late," Nathaniel whispered, sliding into the seat beside her. Board meeting ran over. He was still in his business suit, having come directly from work. "You made it," Julia said simply. "That's what matters." The ceremony was charming in its amateur enthusiasm. Children singing slightly off-key, a teacher whose speech went on too long, proud parents filming every moment on their phones. When Elijah's name was called, both Nathaniel and Julia stood, applauding wildly as he crossed the small stage, beaming in his miniature cap and gown. "I can't believe how big he's getting," Julia murmured, her eyes suspiciously bright. "He has your smile," Nathaniel replied softly, "especially when he's really happy." As the ceremony ended, families gathered in the school cafeteria for punch and cookies. Elijah ran to them, proudly clutching his certificate. "Dad, Mom, did you see me? I didn't trip like Miguel did." "You were perfect, buddy," Nathaniel assured him, kneeling down for a hug. "We're so proud of you," Julia added, smoothing his tousled hair. Principal Rodriguez approached them, smiling warmly. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, Elijah is such a joy to have in class. His progress this year has been remarkable." Before either could correct her assumption, she continued, "If you're interested, our summer enrichment program still has a few spots. The cooking class in particular seems right up Elijah's alley, given what his teachers tell me about his interests." "That sounds wonderful," Julia began. "But we'll definitely consider it," Nathaniel interjected smoothly. "Could you send us the information?" After the principal moved on, Julia raised an eyebrow at him. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Nathaniel shrugged, a faint smile playing at his lips. Easier than explaining. For once, Julia didn't bristle at the implication. Instead, a thoughtful expression crossed her face as she watched Nathaniel lift Elijah onto his shoulders for a better view of the room. Later, as they walked home through the early summer evening, Elijah skipped ahead, stopping to examine interesting rocks and bugs with the focused attention only children can muster. "He asked me something interesting yesterday," Julia said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Oh?" Nathaniel glanced at her curiously. "He asked if we could all live in the same house," Julia said, carefully casual. "Apparently Miguel's parents moved back in together after their reconciliation, and now Elijah thinks that's how it works." Nathaniel's heart stuttered. "What did you tell him?" "That it's not that simple. That adults need time to figure things out." She hesitated, then added, "But I didn't say no." Nathaniel stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Julia, don't make more of it than it is," she said quickly. "I'm just telling you because things are changing. For all of us." And I don't know where we're heading, but I'm not as afraid of it as I was. It was the closest she had come to acknowledging the subtle shift in their relationship, from wary co-parents to something warmer, something with potential beyond their shared love for Elijah. I never stopped thinking. About you, Nathaniel admitted, his voice low. Even when I told myself I had moved on, even when I dated other women, built my company, created this whole life that had nothing to do with you, there was always this space, this Julia-shaped emptiness that nothing else could fill. Julia looked away, but not before he caught the shimmer of tears in her eyes. We're not the same people we were 7 years ago, she said softly. No, he agreed. We're not. You're stronger. I'm learning to be better. He reached out, hesitantly touching her hand. But some things don't change, Julia. How I feel about you, that never changed. She didn't pull away from his touch, but didn't reciprocate either. I can't make any promises, Nathaniel. There's too much history, too much hurt. I'm not asking for promises, he said gently. Just possibility. A door left slightly open rather than locked and bolted. Before she could respond, Elijah came running back, excitement written across his features. Mom, Dad, can we go to the park? Please, just for a little while? Julia met Nathaniel's eyes, something unspoken passing between them. Yes, she said, her gaze still on Nathaniel even as she answered Elijah. I think we have time for that. At the park, twilight was settling over the city, painting the sky in purples and pinks. Elijah raced toward the playground while Nathaniel and Julia settled on a bench nearby, close enough to watch him but far enough to speak privately. I have something to show you, Julia said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a business card, handing it to Nathaniel. Julia Winters, culinary instructor, he read aloud. Julia, this is wonderful. When did this happen? I took your advice, she admitted. I met with that investor you introduced me to. She loved my ideas for children's cooking classes. A hint of pride colored her voice. We're starting small, weekend workshops at first. But if they're successful, there's potential for more. They will be successful, Nathaniel said with certainty. You're an amazing teacher. I've seen you with Elijah in the kitchen. That's actually why I'm telling you this, Julia said, suddenly serious. These classes will take up my weekends for a while. I was hoping you might take Elijah during those times, not just for a few hours, but overnight. Proper father-son time. The trust implicit in her request wasn't lost on Nathaniel. I'd be honored, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Truly, Julia. They sat in companionable silence, watching Elijah play. The park was emptying as darkness fell, but their bench remained illuminated by a nearby lamppost, a small island of light in the gathering dusk. I meant what I said before, Nathaniel said eventually. About my feelings for you. I understand if you don't feel the same way anymore, but I wanted you to know. Julia didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on Elijah as he climbed the jungle gym. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear. I tried to hate you, you know. After everything, it would have been easier. She turned to face him, her expression open and vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen since before their separation. But I couldn't. Not completely. And now, Nathaniel prompted gently when she trailed off.
Now I'm starting to remember why I loved you, she admitted. Not the wealthy CEO or the charming man who saved us that night, but the person who sits on the floor playing Uno for hours because it makes Elijah happy. The man who remembers how
I take my coffee, who notices when I'm tired and sends me home to rest while he handles bedtime. The father who is learning to tie shoelaces and clean-skinned knees and check for monsters under the bed. Her words wrapped around Nathaniel's heart, squeezing until he could barely breathe. Julia, he began, but she shook her head, silencing him. I'm not making any declarations, she said firmly. I'm just saying that door you mentioned, it's not locked anymore. But we walk through it slowly, if at all, for Elijah's sake and our own. Before Nathaniel could respond, Elijah came running toward them, cheeks flushed with exertion and excitement. "Dad," he called, slightly out of breath as he reached them. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything, buddy," Nathaniel replied, shifting his attention to his son. Elijah climbed onto the bench between them, looking suddenly serious. "Do I have a dad now? Like for real? Forever?" The simple question, asked with a child's direct innocence, caught both adults off guard. Julia reached out, squeezing Nathaniel's arm gently. Permission, encouragement. "Yes," Nathaniel said, his voice thick with emotion as he met his son's gaze. "You have a dad now? For real? Forever? No matter what happens, I will always be your father, and I will always love you." Elijah considered this for a moment, then nodded decisively. "Good," he said, his serious expression melting into a smile as he wrapped his small arms around Nathaniel's neck in a fierce hug. Over the boy's shoulder, Nathaniel's eyes met Julia's. In hers, he saw not the pain of the past or the uncertainty of the future, but the simple truth of the present moment. They were here, together, a family being forged not through obligation or convenience, but through choice, through forgiveness, through love that had weathered the harshest storms and somehow improbably survived. The questions children ask often cut straight to what matters most. Their innocent perspective strips away our adult complications and reminds us of simple truths we've forgotten. When has a child's question made you see your life with sudden clarity? Autumn painted Central Park in shades of crimson and gold, the air crisp with promise as Nathaniel walked its familiar paths. 6 months had passed since that summer evening when Elijah had asked if he had a father, for real. 6 months of careful steps forward, occasional steps back, and a growing certainty that some wounds, while never forgotten, could truly heal. Julia's cooking classes had become wildly successful, expanding from weekend workshops to a full program, hosted by a prestigious culinary school in the city. Photos of her teaching children how to make pasta from scratch had been featured in local papers, her natural warmth and patience capturing the hearts of students and parents alike. Nathaniel had made changes too. He'd restructured his work schedule, delegating more responsibility to his executive team so he could be home by 6 most evenings. The corporate world that had once consumed his every waking moment now took second place to school pickups and science projects and family dinners around Julia's kitchen table. Today, he carried a small box in his pocket as he approached their favorite park bench, the same one where, months ago, Julia had opened the door to possibility between them. She was already waiting, wrapped in a burgundy scarf against the autumn chill, watching Elijah play among the fallen leaves with other children. "Sorry I'm late," Nathaniel said, settling beside her. Julia smiled, the ease of her expression a testament to how far they had come. "You're right on time." Elijah just spotted Miguel and raced off to play. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, shoulders almost touching, watching their son's unbridled joy as he leapt into a pile of leaves. "I have something for you," Nathaniel said finally, withdrawing the small box from his pocket. "It's not what you might think," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Not yet anyway, that's still down the road if we ever get there." Curious, Julia opened the box to find a key nestled on dark velvet. "It's to a storefront on Sullivan Street," Nathaniel explained. "The lease is paid for 1 year. There's a fully equipped kitchen in the back, a space for classes in the front. It's yours. Or rather, it's for your cooking school. The paperwork is in your name only. No strings, no conditions." Julia stared at the key, then at him, speechless. "I know what you're thinking," he continued before she could protest. "That it's too much, that you haven't earned it, that you don't want to be dependent on me. But Julia, this isn't charity. It's an investment in your talent, in your dream, the dream you put aside to raise our son alone." "Nathaniel," she began, but he gently took her hand. "You once told me that what hurt most wasn't the poverty or the struggle, but watching your dream slip away while you fought just to survive. I can't change the past, I can't give you back those 7 years, But I can give you this, not as your whatever I am to you now, but as someone who believes in you, who always has. Julia's fingers closed around the key, tears shimmering in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it, Nathaniel urged softly. Not for me, for you, for the teacher you were meant to be. After a long moment, Julia nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. Thank you, she whispered. Nathaniel relaxed, relief washing over him. There's something else, he said. Something I need to ask you. Julia raised an eyebrow, suddenly wary. What is it? My lease is up next month, he said carefully. And I've been thinking, the penthouse is beautiful, but it's never felt like home. Not really. It's just where I live. Okay, Julia said slowly, not following his train of thought. There's a brownstone for sale, in Brooklyn, near good schools with a yard for Elijah. It has 2 separate living spaces, one upstairs, one down, each with its own entrance. He paused, gathering courage. I thought maybe you and Elijah could take one, I could take the other. Separate but connected, for Elijah's sake. Julia stared at him, understanding dawning. You want us to live together, but not together? For now, Nathaniel clarified, it would give Elijah the stability of having both parents under one roof without complicating things between us before we're ready, if we're ever ready. Julia was quiet for a long moment, considering. That's a big step, Nathaniel. I know. And if it's too much too soon, I understand. But these past months have shown me what matters. Not the penthouse views or the corporate empire. Just this, us, our family, whatever shape it takes. A small smile played at the corners of Julia's mouth. You've changed. I've tried to, he said honestly. For Elijah, for you, for myself. Julia looked out at the park, at their son now engaged in an impromptu game of tag with other children. Can I think about it? Of course, Nathaniel said immediately. Take all the time you need. Another comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Elijah came running over, cheeks flushed from play and exertion. Mom, Dad, can we get hot chocolate, please? Miguel says there's a cart by the fountain. Sure, buddy, Nathaniel said, standing and offering his hand. Elijah took it without hesitation, then reached for Julia's hand too, creating a chain of connection between the three of them. As they walked toward the hot chocolate vendor, Elijah, swinging between them, Julia leaned closer to Nathaniel. Yes, she said quietly, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. Yes? Nathaniel repeated, not daring to assume. To the brownstone, Julia clarified. Separate but connected. For Elijah's sake. She paused, then added so softly he almost missed it. And maybe eventually for ours too. Something expanded in Nathaniel's chest. Hope, joy, possibility. As they continued along the leaf-strewn path, their son between them, the future unwritten but brighter than it had ever been. 3 hot chocolates in hand. They found a bench. Near the fountain, Elijah chattering excitedly about his upcoming school play as Julia helped him wipe whipped cream from his chin. Watching them, Nathaniel felt a sense of profound gratitude wash over him. Not for the second chance he didn't deserve, not for forgiveness he hadn't earned, but for this moment, imperfect, ordinary, and more precious than all the wealth he had ever accumulated. What are you thinking about? Julia asked, catching his expression. Nathaniel smiled, reaching out to brush a leaf from her hair with gentle fingers. Just that some mistakes can't be undone, he said. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, they can lead you exactly where you need to be. Julia's eyes softened as she met his gaze. Not luck, she corrected quietly. Choice. We choose to be here, now. We choose to move forward. We choose our family, every single day. From the mouth of the woman who had once been homeless because of his abandonment, these words were more valuable than any corporate acquisition, any financial success. Elijah, oblivious to the weight of the moment passing between his parents, tugged at Nathaniel's sleeve. "Dad," he said earnestly, chocolate smudged at the corner of his mouth, "when we live in the new house, can I have a dog?" Nathaniel and Julia exchanged glances, shared laughter bubbling up between them. "We'll see," they said in unison, the simple phrase carrying all the ordinary magic of parents united in purpose, in love for their child, in hope for the future they were building together. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the park, they gathered their empty cups and headed home, not to separate addresses but toward a shared destination, a family forged not by circumstance or convention, but by choice, by forgiveness, by love that had endured the harshest winter and emerged, against all odds, into spring. Thank you for joining us on this journey of redemption and healing. If this story touched your heart, remember that second chances begin with a single step toward forgiveness, whether giving it or receiving it. The past cannot be undone, but the future is written in the choices we make today. What choice will you make? What step will you take? Share this video with someone who might need to hear this message of hope and healing. And remember, in your own story, it's never too late to make things right.